What's going on, guys? Phil here. Wanted to bring you a video today. It's a little bit of an odd timing, but it'll all kind of work out. There's some extenuating circumstances, but my plan going forward is, because I am keeping track of all my stats for this kind of shit anyway, just for fun, to make some sort of update videos along the way. Essentially, each week, going to be doing a video about what decks I've been playing, how they've been doing, what I've been facing up against, the meta, stuff like that. And then the plan is to do it every week, and then every month to have like a month in review kind of segment where we go back through everything in the overall stats. This originally was going to just be a monthly thing, and then, with the newest update, they brought back Genn and Baku, and so I imagined that was going to change the meta a lot, and so I wanted to do a video about the stats before Genn and Baku really impacted the meta. And then as we've played through it, they have not actually made that big of a splash in the meta in the very beginning. And so all of it kind of melded together to form what we're making now. But going forward, the plan for this series will be to do weekly updates as well as a monthly big, overview video. But for this video, let's get into it. This was a little thing I threw together about 2 weeks ago when I hit Legend this month. I hit Legend on the 8th, and I had posted this to Reddit and did a little bit of some discussion with it on the 9th. This showcased the decks that I used for my climb from Bronze 10 to Diamond, and then from Diamond into Legend, along with a couple notes on what I felt, how they were running. Essentially, I had a great time on my initial climb this month. I played exclusively Excavate Rogue until it began to falter a little bit. Deck has been the nuts for quite a while, outside of, maybe Highlander Warrior and maybe like Zarimi Priest. But it's been a very potent, potent deck in the meta for quite a while. So played that. It's a lot of fun. There's always a lot of decisions. There's a lot of randomness with the Excavate Treasures and with your legendaries. So every game feels a little different. There's a lot of, agency, I think is the word that people like to use. So it makes every game feel different. And so that's why it's a lot of fun to play. However, as you get better and better and your opponents get better and better, you have to actually know what you're doing a little bit. And I have not put a ton of extensive practice into really thinking out that deck or playing that deck. And so once I hit Diamond, I fell off a little bit with it, decided let's take a break, let's try some other stuff, right? Was doing some hand buff Paladin, everyone on the Reddit's complaining about it. It is apparently the absolute nuts during the climb. People are saying they've come back after not playing for years. They play hand buff Paladin. It's like the easiest Legend climb they've ever done. And that's kind of true. The deck is really, really strong. It's very easy to play. It's a very, nice and basic, mid-rangey aggro type of deck. Hand buff has always been a really fun mechanic, honestly. I've loved hand buff Paladin. When Crime Street Outfitter got buffed, I was ecstatic. I missed the 1-mana 1/2 that died when it drew you a card if it had any hand buff stats. That guy was absolutely insane. Hand buff Paladin's a lot of fun, but, we've been playing that for couple months, and so didn't jam it too much. We had already hit Legend last month with that as our main deck, and so played it a little. Not too much changed. Really solid deck, obviously. Zarimi Priest, everybody already knew it was good. I never played Priest decks, and so I did not know it was good. Obviously, Zarimi had already been nerfed to increase the amount of dragons that you needed to play, because the deck was even more insane before. But it's still very potent, still really good. Definitely big recommend. I had it as my best deck in format. It might still be best deck in format, but I think that I might have to give that honor over to Highlander Warrior right now. My only reservation with that is that I haven't played a lot of Highlander Warrior, but I've played against it quite a bit, and obviously it's been a menace for a while. It's gotten hit with multiple nerfs as well, and so that's always going to be a very, important player in the meta right now. Bran is just too good to not run. And the deck just has so much healing potential with, like, the Zilliax into Boom, which summons, like, 5 Zilliaxes that all have lifesteal, and yeah. So it's just, that might be the best deck in format. Could very easily be better, but I really do like the Zarimi Priest deck. I think it has, a pretty good matchup spread, and honestly, you kind of never are just completely out. It's really solid. Gave Owl Onius Druid a try. Seems a little bit like a meme deck. Everyone always tries to make Malagos spell damage big big spell druid work, or not. Big spell is not the right wordage to use there because it's normally focused on little spells doing big damage. But you know what I mean. Spell damage druid's always kind of wavering around. Obviously, with Owlonius being printed, they were going to push it a little bit. Chia Drake is really, really good, but you can't run that in this deck, and so that like makes it a little more difficult. And occasionally you dead draw, but we run both Freya and Iona, so there's less of a chance that you dead draw. And I saw some lists that would choose one over the other, and then if you brick, then you really brick. At least with this list I was running, if you brick one of your two big hits, you still have a good chance. So yeah, that was a fun deck. Not able to speak on it at a high enough level to really give like good thoughts, but it was a lot of fun trying to learn. I did go positive while playing it, while learning it, while having no idea what to do from the start. It's not like I went in having an idea how much damage it could do or like how the combo actually worked. We were piecing it together game by game, so seems pretty strong, but it, very susceptible to stuff like Dirty Rat. That's very common right now. Don't really know how the Highlander Warrior matchup fares, because sometimes you should be okay. Boom Boss really fucks you, but a lot of people are not running Boom Boss anymore, so I don't know. Up in the air there for sure. Not my strongest point deck, but a good part of my climb, so I wanted to mention it. Handbuff Death Knight, I in the thread was talking about how this seems to be the new hot deck to be playing. How I think it's kind of inconsistent, seems kind of mediocre. I did not have a lot of confidence in it, although I have not piloted it very much. And so going forward with the stats that are going to be next, this is actually a variation of this deck is going to be one that we're going to be testing going into the last week of the month. Got a list off of some guy on Reddit who I will luckily have his name for credit later on when we pull up the list again. But seems really interesting. And during the discussion that we had about this hand buff deck in the thread on Reddit, people are asking about the Quillbore guy, the 4-mana 2/4. And I said, I don't think it's that strong. I don't think it's that good. It's only a one of for a reason. And the list that we're going to be showcasing, trying out, runs two of it, and it's actually its main win condition. And so that I think that's pretty interesting. I think that'll be fun to experiment with. And then I finally had finished up my climb with Aggro Demon Hunter, Naga Demon Hunter. This deck, it kind of disappeared for a long time, and supposedly, according to, some of the Reddit and the Vicious Syndicate podcast, I don't actually listen to their podcast, so I don't want to say like a very definitive thing against them at all. Love that they do what they do. They have a lot of stats. I love stats. I'm a big math nerd. But I saw the guy that makes like recap posts of here's what this podcast was all about. And the main sentiment seemed to be that the reason people don't play this Naga Demon Hunter deck is because the community as a whole is like banded together that we despise this play pattern. We hate how insane Blind Eye Sharpshooter is. Like, this is just, we're all going to boycott this. And I don't think that's at all what the narrative is or should be or could be. That seems a little bit overblown. But the deck's really fun. The deck's pretty aggressive. You have a lot of comeback potential, and you have a lot of mana cheat. Window Shopper's a lot of fun. The weapon got nerfed, and so Umpire's Grasp costing 4 instead of 3 obviously makes the decks a little bit slower, and it makes it a little more difficult to navigate sometimes. But you just have so much mana cheat and so much burst damage that you can almost always find a way. But so these were the lists that I was running. This is how our climb did pre-Diamond, how we did Diamond to Legend, and then where we started out at. So we started on the 9th at 1897 Legend. Then, now, moving forward to today, these are the stats that I have for the 17th through the 24th. And again, once the new month rolls over, we'll decide exactly how the segments go. But because of how timing works out, this is just the date range that we have. In this timeline, I played 54 matches, which is a little annoying because I think that this math only adds up to 53, so I must have missed one somewhere or miscounted occasionally. But We played about 50 matches, which is not an insane sample size. We had a lot going on. It's no biggie. Uh, and this was the first week where Baku and Genn were allowed back in Standard. They've made their triumphant return from the Hall of Fame to hopefully not ruin the experience until July 23rd. And, I thought that they were going to make a much bigger bang than they did. It seems that they're not really that common right now. But I had a lot of fun. I instantly wanted to try both Odd Demon Hunter and Odd Rogue. And so I went ahead and made my own Odd Rogue piece of shit lists. And I will always give credit where credit is due. So, like this Odd Demon Hunter deck I got off of Reddit from a guy named Lucero. You'd be able to find his post most likely on the competitive Hearthstone subreddit. That's where most of the lists that I get come from. And as soon as I saw someone else was experimenting with Baku and Genn, I knew I had to try it out. And his deck's pretty solid. There was actually another person who made a thread about Odd Demon Hunter where they had something like 20 or 22 1-drops in their deck, and Lucero came in clutch underneath his post with his list and said, "Hey man, love your idea. That's going a little bit ham. Here's like a real deck." And this deck's been a lot of fun. That's definitely been my most enjoyable use of Baku so far. And then following that up, we had Advanced Mora on Reddit as well come up with Even Shaman. And Even Shaman's been a lot of fun. Its matchups are much more difficult, I would say. It's going to be a lot more polarizing than something like your Odd Demon Hunter, which might sound a little weird, but you just have so much like burst damage and like big turns available with your Odd Demon Hunter that you can kind of get through a lot of other like worse decks trying to out control you. But Even Shaman always requires a board. And so if they have any tools to remove your board, then you are absolutely fucked. And so occasionally there's just matchups that feel basically unwinnable. But in the case of that, you run Hearth so you can get a brand new deck. You run 2 of the Wind Fury weapon because the Wind Fury weapon is insane. So you have some answers, and you're always going to have tempo. So as long as you go first and you get Trusty Companion in your opening hand, you are going to be very, very set with Even Shaman. Then I think the biggest deck and the most fun deck that I had, like the best time I had this week, was going to be Miracle Rogue for sure. Kind of forgot this archetype existed. I had a friend chilling at like 500, top 500 legend, and he was facing a lot of Even Warlock. He said, "Man, I wonder what beats Even Warlock. I'm going to try making bigger things than 8/8s by turn 4. And so it turns out making 10 9s occasionally, or anything with Spark Bots to make them 9 9s with Stealth or Divine Shield, whatever you add to your 0 mana 8/8 Playhouse Giant to make it bigger than their 8/8s, pretty consistently you can get a very massive board very quickly. And against more minion centric decks, rather than just making a couple 8/8s on turn 4 or something, if they play any 1, 2, 3 drops and you ever get the Gaslight Gatekeeper into 0 mana, get 2 4-drops, you've basically won the board for the entire game, and so you're set. Has very, very strong matchups in the meta right now. Basically, my consensus of the meta is that you either have to be having 1 or extremely, extremely ahead with Burst in your hand by turn 5, 6, occasionally 4, depending on your matchup. And if you don't have the win secured by like turn 5, you better be planning a very long game where you have a plan to outgrind, outmaneuver anything, because resources are just so abundant right now. There's a lot of healing, there's a lot of Highlander stuff, there's a lot of Discover, there's a lot of Generation. So you need a very solid aggro game plan to win insanely quickly, or you need to be ready to grind, and this has a very, very set game plan just out the get-go. Very fun deck, definitely recommend. Probably the most competitive deck I played all week. Then we brought back Excavate Rogue. It's the same list, I'm pretty sure, as the one from the previous week. We can double check that. It is, in fact, the exact same list. And that's just because it's always fun. Like I said, player agency is a very good thing to have. The deck being, as strong as it is, that's not really... I'm not going to mark against the design team for having random generation be strong in a game where random generation has always been strong. I don't really see a way to nerf the deck very well without kind of completely breaking it. And at the end of the day, if they just print some shitty spells so that sometimes we get worse rolls, that's fine by me. Very fun deck. Excavate Rogue, always an option. Super good. Probably the most consistently, one of the most consistently seen decks that's not like a newer archetype. I have seen this pop up every week consistently for months. Solid deck. Then we have my pet deck of the week. I was trying out Aura Paladin because I realized that with the Holy Cowboy effect that reduces your next holy spell by 2, you can get a really early Crafter's Aura, and summoning a bunch of 7 or 6 drops or whatever it summons big ass minions way ahead of curve. That's really good. Ways to extend that is the new Cardboard Golem card, which I specifically randomly generated in a Miracle Rogue game while my friend that was top 500 playing it was spectating me, and I said, I don't think I have ever seen this card played. And he messaged me back and said, well, that's because it's dog shit. And so I was determined to make it not dog shit. So this is what we're going to be jamming. We're going to be building, trying to make Aura Paladin work in the next week. But right now it is 0-2 and really bad. And finally, we have this hand buff Death Knight deck that I stole off of Reddit from Capital Tennis. Like I said, this is the list that is based around the Quill Boar as your main win condition. So you buff up your Quill Boar in hand, you play it and make copies of it with Sinister Soul Cage. You can yodel it and triggers Death Rattle a million times. That pause, rewind. That didn't make any sense. It doesn't have a Death Rattle. You hand buff it and then you make a copy of it. You hand buff it with the yodeler ahead of time. There you go. We got there. Have not played any hand buff Death Knight essentially at all. And so now that I have this new list, that's going to be another plan for the week, is seeing how that goes, because I want to live up to the fact that I said I think that it's the new hotness when I posted that original list, and then I gave it absolutely zero time, thought, or effort. So I appreciate this guy making the strides to have a full list, and I'm going to see, we'll see how he does. Hopefully it does good, though. This week, we went 28-18 with the decks that I've showcased here. As always, there's going to be some decks that I don't show, or there's going to be some matches that essentially, like, who knows, maybe something happened, maybe someone conceded early, maybe someone conceded out. Just one-off decks that don't really matter. Like, if I play one game as even Death Knight and then decide, oh shit, I don't know how to build even Death Knight, it's not really worth talking about. So I lost a game as even Death Knight, and that'll be reflected in the week's overall. So I did showcase every deck that won this week, and then I had some losses in between there. That's okay. We started out at 28-32 and ended at 37-21 Legend. In case you hadn't already seen it, I always leave a little bit of notes, and essentially all that this one mentions is that Genn and Baku were not as impactful as I assumed they were going to be. But, so with that, this is all the decks that I played this week, and now we want to look at something that might be even more useful, is what are we playing against, so that if we didn't already have a plan for the week, what do we want to do to try to be the most competitive? What do we got to beat? What is plaguing us, So let's see. We have played against 7% Death Knights, 2% Demon Hunters, 2% Druids, 7% Hunters, 7% Mages, 2% Paladins, and then a couple real classes over here at the end this week. We have faced mostly Highlander Priest, different variations of Control Warlock, even Warlock making a good presence, especially since, Genn just came back. Gotta give hype for that. And then Highlander Warrior is huge, and a matchup that no matter what stupid stuff we're playing, we are always losing. And that is a good sign that the deck is very strong if it defeats unoptimized lists almost, like, always. Basically, most of the lists that I've been playing, I would say they're good, but they're not SS tier, and Highlander Warrior is obviously the SS tier right now. And so it's expected that that's going to be a bad matchup for us. But yeah, so looking at what we... looking at this, we can see that essentially Warlock, Priest, and Warrior are the entire metagame. Highlander decks are extremely popular right now. Genn is getting a little bit of love in Warlock, and so you're going to be seeing a little bit of even Warlock over the more typical Highlander or Control Warlock. With time, we'll see if that actually sticks or if they're going to revert back. Highlander Warlock also getting a lot more playable, I suppose. With both Even and Insanity Lock as strong as they are, I was really surprised to run into two different Highlander Warlocks. But it fits nicely for me because Highlander decks are really strong. I think that Reno's insane. Essentially, you have to have your super aggro game plan, win by turn 4, 5, 6, or you have to be ready to outgrind an insane Reno deck. And so it does not surprise me to see that that's spreading to every class. Even if we look at the classes that had very little representation, our only representation for Druid was a Highlander deck. We had a Highlander Death Knight. We had miscellaneous Death Knights where we're not sure exactly what they were, so maybe some of them were also Highlander. We just didn't realize. We have Highlander Hunter in here. So, like, even in the classes where you see no representation, you're seeing people experiment with Highlander decks just because of how strong Reno is. And it's one of the best, if you're playing against Highlander Warrior, may as well have the same tools available. So run a Highlander deck, have Reno, hope that it wins you the game. Outside of their strength, Genn and Baku have not made too much of an impact. That's a little bit sad. Hopefully the upcoming Reno changes that just got announced today on the 25th will, hopefully impact the meta enough to maybe see some other stuff step up. I don't really know what they're going to do to nerf Reno. Like, maybe they make him 10, but even then, like, does one extra turn really change the fact that I'm still going to be playing a Highlander deck? I don't really think so. So I think it's going to have to be something more substantial. We'll see what happens. And as final notes, I do see especially a lot on the subreddit that apparently Handbuff Paladin and Hunter are very commonly seen on the climb. They're apparently oppressively strong. Hunter always has a higher win rate at lower ranks just because it's an inherently aggressive class. It has a way to end the game even when you don't know that you should be ending the game. And so it's always going to have a higher win rate the lower you are. And then Handbuff Paladin is obviously a very strong deck right now. It's been, one of the top tiers, A tier for in the meta for at least 2 months, 3 months. And so obviously it's really strong, but I think you can see by the fact that we played against no Paladin at all this week, essentially. And, I've stopped playing the deck when it has hit me Legend 2 months in a row. Like, at some point, people learn how to play against it. They get the play pattern down, so you got to switch things up. And that's how the metagame evolves. So maybe it'll come back around. Maybe Restaurant Vipers stop seeing as much tech play. That would definitely help. But for now, I'm very surprised to still be seeing complaints about Handbuff Paladin, guys. Gotta be honest. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. This has been our weekly update. If you liked what, the kind of idea that we're doing, there's gonna, hopefully as we go on, be a little more polished, be more stats we can talk about. I was halfway through this month before I started tracking whether or not we had the coin in our hand or not, whether we started first or second. And so, especially during the monthly breakdowns, we'll have a lot more stats to go off of, a larger sample size. So for especially decks that have a very large sample size, we'll be able to dive in pretty deep into their matchups, into whether going first or second matters, how that impacts your play patterns, things like that. But we want to try and keep these weekly videos a little bit shorter, a little bit easier to watch. And so hopefully this was semi-digestible. If you guys have any questions, concerns, comments, feedback, blah, 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 feel free to comment down below. And, hopefully we can start getting some more routine discussion going on. Because outside of the Hearthstone Reddit and the competitive Hearthstone Reddit with the what's working threads, there's not always a lot going on in the community. So it'd be nice to have a more central place where everyone can kind of talk about what's going on. Awesome. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.